Hello. Right. What an interesting weekend of Formula One that was. Significant in the championship, as we all know, and the gap is now between Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri 40 points. I mean, how this has happened? It's just out of really just like nowhere that nobody's really paid attention. And then during this race, obviously with the collision in the sprint, we'll talk about that, and then obviously the race win as well. You have to ask, have have McLaren just taken their eye off the ball a little bit with their car? And two, which is actually a bit of more of an easier question, has something been unlocked inside that Red Bull? Now, for me, let's start off with the latter. That Red Bull clearly something has been found that has it maybe went away for a little bit because the Red Bull for a while was just absolutely not nowhere, but compared to where it was in 2023 and the first half of 2024, it you know I mean, that was obviously pure dominance and absolutely brilliant driving by Max. And Max actually still has driven brilliantly, but the car has just not been underneath him quite as much. You look at Hungary, for example, the fact that he's making mistakes in the wet in Silverstone. Looking back on that now, how costly was that mistake? 8 points. There's a couple of races which I am going to highlight. That being one which, Max Verstappen might look back on and go, oh, if that hadn't had happened, if that hadn't have happened, I would have won this championship. And I think there are a couple of them. So anyway, onto the old discussion. Will Max Verstappen do it? I mean, sounds mad from where he was, but if anybody can, yeah, Max definitely can. He absolutely could do it, and if he does, I'll say it now. Probably he's been his best championship since 2021. 23 and 24 were, and almost 2022 as well, although being slightly unfair, but all three of them were relative walks in the park, really. I mean, people talk about 2024 and how, he won it in sometimes like the third or fourth best car. It's like, yeah, you could say that, but that's sort of losing the context of the fact that that car was so utterly dominant at the beginning of the year that he had a lead that basically was just insurmountable, given how dominant that Red Bull was. So, yeah, can he do it? Yes. I mean, he's a better driver than most Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. I mean, that's one of the most obvious things you can say. McLaren just seem to maybe have just stopped designing their car. Maybe they're focusing a lot now on 2026, as with all the other teams as well. So maybe they've just been caught napping a little bit on the development front of just bringing a little upgrade here and there. But yeah, look at Red Bull. I mean, Meckies. I mean, from the state of that Red Bull team after Silverstone, when obviously they got rid of Horner, to now, I mean, suddenly, like, everything suddenly just changed. And, like, under his stewardship, Red Bull, firstly, a lot more likeable. I mean, personally, I think, I'm getting far less annoyed now by Red Bull wins and all that kind of stuff because I don't have to hear Christian Horner's voice anymore. It's Meckies, it's GP, Max. It's all very mature. It's strangely mature for Red Bull, even though they were caught trying to remove the. Actually, some people didn't do this. They tried to remove like a strip on the pit wall that Lando Norris was using for his lining up in his grid box. I mean, that is Red Bull levels of skullduggery sort of thing, and people call it housery and that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, that's the kind of F1 that I like. That's it's not throwing people under the bus and putting people into trouble. It's just having a bit of fun and causing issues and things. But yeah, that Red Bull now. I mean, a variety of tracks we've been to: Monza, Baku, Singapore. Any others off the top of my head? Obviously Austin. Yeah, he's now quick everywhere. That Red Bull now is quick everywhere. So we go into Mexico where we know Max has been, well, imperious in the past. Max has been, 2021, dominated. I mean, he's even dominated when the Red Bull wasn't the fastest car. He just seems to like that circuit. I think it just suits him. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, so I think the big headline, obviously, McLaren's crashing out in the sprint. Now, at least it didn't happen in the main race. So they only lost realistically 6-7 points, something like that. So 6 or 7 points. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's not, as I say, it's not as big as the race. For me, Lando completely innocent. Oscar Piastri was not entirely innocent for me. You're going up into that corner where you can take multiple lines, you've got people behind you. Why are you doing such an aggressive switchback like that when, you're both going straight, you're both going a little bit deep? There are going to be cars on that inside, just with the nature of that turn one. You could take a tight line, you could take the wide line. Why did he do that? Well, it's very clear why he did it. He wanted to overtake Lando. But you need to sometimes just think about the corner, think about the context of it. And obviously, in the moment, but that's the kind of thing that I thought Oscar Piastri wouldn't do. Being a bit calmer than Lando. Maybe it was kind of like a Lando move. A little bit aggressive. Maybe it was still in his head from Singapore. And yeah, Nico Hulkenberg found himself in a place where he didn't want to be. Obviously, Zach Brown had his viewpoint on it, and obviously, when you're emotional, both your cars being everything, you're going to say something. So, to be honest, him being like that, it's purely understandable. It's a very normal reaction and that kind of thing. We saw it after, just a case in point of a different incident, we saw the case in point after, in 2021, a number of times where Red Bull and Mercedes were complaining about each other in terms of the way they were driving him after certain crashes and stuff. You take Brazil, well, it wasn't really a crash there, but Brazil, you've got Saudi, Silverstone, obviously Monza those years. Yeah, so you can see there's just plenty of emotion at play. But I think it is sort of 60-40 Hulkenberg to maybe 60-40 Hulkenberg to Piastri. Because Piastri, one, needs to be thinking a bit more about, maybe he's a championship leader, so he doesn't have to, but, he's cost his team a lot of points. He's also cost his team a lot in terms of damage. But, if you do blame him, that is, some people probably will be saying I'm being a bit harsh here, but I'm just looking at it from a case of what he didn't need to do that switchback. It was so aggressive. It was for 1 point in a sprint race. It's not really, it just wasn't. It wasn't necessary, I think, is probably the one. Just, you've got a healthy lead, just lose out by 1 point. It's not a massive deal. If we come back to the end of the season and he's lost it by a point, then we can maybe have some chats about it. But there's plenty of other points in the season where you'd argue, things have got a bit wrong. Take from Piastri or Australia, for example. So yeah, lots of different things like that. But for me, can Max Verstappen do it? I personally don't think he will. I think he'll just miss out. And there is one moment in this season which Max Verstappen and Red Bull are going to look back on and go, that's where we lost the championship. And that was the complete and utter brain fade that Max had and Red Bull had in Spain. That whole thing with George Russell after the safety car. One point where he didn't need to obviously let George Russell through. He was then told to let George Russell through and then just drove straight into him and got that penalty. If he had just let George Russell through, finished 5th, 10 points, instead he only gets 1, that's 9 points. And you look at how close this is going to be with Max closing in. Mistakes and things like that. You take Silverstone, for example, they have been second. Obviously, would probably have not finished second in the race. He would have ended up finishing 3rd, but thank God he did spin because then we got a Hulkenberg podium. But you look at what, I don't like to look at mistakes. I look at incidents where they could have been, it was a bit needless, and that was just needless. He used his car as a weapon, got himself a penalty, and ended up finishing basically almost out the points when he would have been comfortably in the points. If you add those 9 points on, because he ended up getting one, I think, and go add those points on, 9 points on, he's suddenly not 40 points behind, he's 31. He's basically within a race because of obviously the sprints that are coming up. You know, he could have been going into a race weekend going, I could be leading the championship at the end of this weekend if he hadn't have done that. And I just think that is going to be the thing. I think it's just a little bit too much. An average of 8 points a race, if you've got such different tracks, you're going to assume that McLaren are going to win at least one of the final races. Surely. Which one at this moment in time? I'm absolutely going to be honest, I don't really know. Maybe Qatar, because of the medium speed corners. I think Brazil, McLaren, we didn't really get to see them last year, how quick they actually were last year, and obviously with all the rain and stuff. So maybe if it's dry in Brazil, we'll get a bit more of an idea with that. But yeah, an average of 8 points a weekend. I mean, it is doable because you've got the sprint, so it's obviously doable. And if he wins every race, I think, and if that includes the sprint, I think he does actually win the championship, no matter what I think the McLarens do. Somebody will be able to correct me on that one, but that's what I'm looking at. So, yeah, I mean, if he does it, it'll be incredible, and you just have to. I think if he wins this championship, I'll put him alongside Lewis Hamilton as one of the goats of the sport. At this moment in time, still just a little bit underneath. He still needs one more championship for me. I think championships are important and have to be held into significance. We talk about it in other sports, that people talk about trophies and all that kind of stuff when it comes to teams and players and accolades and all that kind of thing. I think world championships have to be taken into more significance than just dominating races and all that kind of thing. So, and as I said, I have this opinion and I have this nasty feeling that we've already seen Max Verstappen's last world championship. I think he might only get 4. He might leave, he might end up going to WEC or something like that. Obviously he's got his daughter now, so think about. So if there's going to be a way of him managing family life with racing, where maybe he does a bit more online stuff and, does endurance in between, who knows. But yeah, less about that. Anyway, moving back to USA, absolutely dominance from him. I mean, Leclerc helped him out with that. Again, we didn't really see the full McLaren pace because, again, it don't matter how good your car is, you can't overtake, you can't follow. And the wind direction did not help because the DRS then ended up being less effective because of the headwind. Obviously, you're driving into a headwind, your car's going to be slower, so the DRS is more powerful. When you've got a tailwind, your car's being pushed along anyway. So the DRS just wasn't as powerful. I don't think it is as powerful on the McLaren. It very much relies on being out in clean air. You saw it quite a few times with the Mercedes when they were stuck in traffic during the Hamilton dominating era. When they were stuck in traffic, they found it a little bit more difficult to cut through because they built their car with the assumption that they were going to be out in front. So when you're not in front, dirty air. I mean, I've said, I've ranted about that so many times. Just, we need to get rid of dirty air. We wanted to see Lando and Max fighting it out in Austin again, like we did last year. Perfect example. This year, because Leclerc got there and they just had enough straight line speed Ferrari, and for once, strategy-wise, they absolutely nailed it. I mean, Leclerc, drove, annoyingly for Lando and Oscar, Leclerc drove absolutely phenomenally, and I think it could actually come down to Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell and Antonelli about who wins this title. Because if they get in the way, which I do think the one team in Las Vegas, like they did last year, will get in the way and win, it means then you're not gaining as many points in the championship on your rivals. So yeah, well done to Leclerc though, absolutely phenomenal drive. Hamilton again having to ease up as he went across the line again. Just that car, possibly one of the worst he's driven in terms of, trying to get to the end of races. In Singapore, his brake just decides to fail, and we didn't get to see him trying to get over the line. It was just like, oh, here's Max's girlfriend or whatever it was, or Carlos Sainz's partner, I think it was. I can't remember now. I just wiped that from my memory. So, I mean, it was interesting this weekend, the number of wide shots we got. We got a lot more of the wide shots of cars instead of people in the garages. So clearly, the race director has, or whoever it is, not the race director, the camera director guy, clearly have taken that on board. So we'll see what they do for Mexico, because I think with the Mexican fans, there's going to be a lot more of going into the crowd. There's going to be a lot of stories because, of course, Perez coming back to the grid next year. So it'll be interesting to see who the Mexicans go out to support, because I think they're a little bit annoyed with Red Bull with the way Perez got treated. So we will have to see on that one. But moving on to Mexico. Now, welcome to Dirty Air Central. This is going to not be a good race. The only way this ends up being a good race is if there's a mistimed safety car from someone. It's possibly the best start of the season. In terms of the run to turn one, because it's the longest, it's going to be incredible, that run down to turn one. If we have, let's say, Max, Oscar and Lando qualifying that top three, whatever order it is, it's going to be amazing, because the person who starts in third is going to get absolutely, the king of all slipstreams. I mean, I could see Max and a McLaren coming together in that first corner. I could genuinely see that happening. Both, contact, people spinning round, DNF possibly. I just genuinely look at it and go, if you can make it through that first corner, and you're in that top three, you're those three and you're in that top three, I think you're definitely going to be smiling and setting yourself up well for the race. The tyres look like they're going a little bit of a split in it. They're making out a step, so I don't think we've got the C3 tyre. I think it's the C2, the C4, and the C5. Is it? I think it's one of them anyway. They're going to try and generate a two-stop out of it, but I just don't see that happening. We've seen two stops there before, but I think now, with the cars being as quick as they are, the time lost in pit lane will be quite long, probably. Unless we get safety cars, which we don't normally get. The only way we get safety cars is if somebody bins it. Of course, that sector 2 could result in it, because the barriers are obviously close and it's very, very quick. But the thing is mistakes are actually quite rare these days in that respect, so it comes down to a car failure. I think we had one, what year was it? 2022, I want to say, with K-Mag, I think, went into the wall. It was one of the houses. It was either K-Mag or... No, I think it was Magnussen. And obviously we had the red flag, which then meant another restart, and Max got an unbelievable start, as he seems to always do at the moment. So, yeah, predictions for Mexico. I mean, you can't. Forget being able to follow. You can't follow through sector 2, and then that sector 3. I know they have to try and probably slow the cars down because they probably want a certain speed going through it with all the fans there. But come on, we need to be doing something about that sector 3 going forwards, because it doesn't work. That sector 3 is absolutely dreadful. I mean, Formula E cars, they go round that. They have a different route where they go round sort of in a circle and then they go round the stadium. I'm just wondering whether you can create something like that where it's a bit like a hairpin and then take them round the back of the station, where you can do a different route. Because at this moment in time, unless you are massively, massively quicker, you're not going to be able to overtake. And we just hope that the DRS is powerful, which basically means we want a headwind down that front straight. So that's the only hope we realistically got on that. So who knows? I'm not hopeful for a good race. Not hopeful for a good race. Of course, I'm hopeful, but I'm not. We're being realistically. We're not going to get a good race unless something goes wrong safety cars, we get a mixed up grid through something that happens in Q3 or Q2, bit of rain, which I haven't looked at the forecast. It doesn't rain, so it probably won't rain. So let's ignore weather out of it. The other team to look out for right now are Williams. I think it was Carlos Sainz who scored just as many points as Oscar Piastri in the past three races or something, which is just madness. Which one shows how good the Williams has been, but also how poor Oscar Piastri has been. And that actually is the thing that's realistically dictating how good this championship is Piastri has just dropped off massively. You could argue that in Monza he was there and should have been there, and you're looking at these papaya rules now. They are getting. I'm now understanding why people are getting so annoyed with them. The papaya rules say consequences. We don't need to know about all of that kind of stuff. Keep that in house. We don't need to know. It's pointless. Let them race now. The championship's won in terms of the constructors. That's what your McLaren want, and they have this problem again where they're going to end up with two drivers again. And I look back to 2007, and it's got a very, very weird reminiscing feeling about it. Where, well, with that one, driver came up through the middle, but Lewis obviously had a disaster in the last two races, which is why he didn't win that title that year. One with the tyre failing and obviously the gearbox or transmission failure in Brazil. But yeah, in all though, I just can't see Max winning it for the reason of I think George Russell's going to randomly show up somewhere, and I think Leclerc's going to randomly show up somewhere, and I'm not necessarily win, but just get in the way. And if they get in the way, let's say in Las Vegas, you've got Russell first, Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Max. Leclerc might not be the easiest one to pass. He might not be easy to pass because of the dirty air. Of course, Max will launch it, but Leclerc's not fighting for a championship. He could just have a bit of fun. And if you get a bit wrong with those guys, and I think that's what you saw with Lando, in Austin, he had a championship to think about, and all of a sudden he wasn't as confident, and Leclerc was like, well, I'm going to be here. I've got nothing to lose. It's you who've got everything to lose. Championships to think about are legitimately things that drivers are going to be thinking about. And Max Verstappen, does he have anything to lose? No. In fact, it's a bonus that he's even in this position. It's like when Vettel won the championship in 2012. He came from such a long way back. And, Alonso drove the wheels off that Ferrari. He should never have been there in the first place. But once he got there, suddenly, in the last couple of races, things started to go a little bit wrong for him. And look, we've got 5 races left. 2 of them are Brazil and, well, we say Abu Dhabi, but it's Brazil and obviously, Las Vegas. And I think those 2 races are going to decide it. Can Max win everything at Brazil? That's going to be huge for him. If he doesn't win every single race, then it just makes it easier for McLaren, obviously. And when I say that, it's because if you think about it, with 141 points left on the table, Oscar Piastri needs 101 of those points to guarantee finishing ahead of Max Verstappen, I think, or 102. Right, and that's what he's got to think. It's 102. But if he takes a win, suddenly he doesn't need 102. It'll be 90 or 80 in terms of that total. So McLaren is still polling and going to be probably overall fastest, but the problem that Max will have is that if one McLaren drops out, the other one's still there. And the other one, because he's got no teammate, and those 2 McLaren drivers, unlike Perez and Bottas, well, you could say Bottas more than Perez, especially with Abu Dhabi 2021, they will get in the way. They will cause them all matter of problems. Which, again, the teamwork that McLaren can do if one of their drivers drops out the running. Let's say Lando DNFs in Mexico, Oscar wins, and Max is second. Suddenly, it's just like, well, you might as well just put all the eggs in the Oscar Piastri basket, But Lando Norris is still going to be there to stop Max. He's going to be there helping out Oscar as much as he probably doesn't want to. But with the teamwork and the way the team dynamic will then change, he'll be there. And it'll be exactly the same thing. If Oscar, let's say, DNFs in Mexico, has a bad race in Brazil, Lando wins, let's say he wins Mexico, he wins Brazil, Max wins the sprint, Max is second in both of them. You then look at it and go, well, obviously then Oscar Piastri will help. I mean, these are all scenarios that none of these will obviously play out, because obviously Max is probably going to win in Mexico with the way he goes around there. That is my prediction, is Max to win it, with both McLarens behind him. Unless, obviously, things go a bit wrong. Which in Formula 1, they often do. You know, we always think, oh, you know, all he needs to do is this, this and this. But we saw with Brazil last year, suddenly just conditions can change, things can change, external factors with people crashing can change, and it'll throw it all inside out. So, as we go into Mexico, I think watch out for what's going to happen, and expect something to happen which is not expected. I think we're definitely going to see Max collide with a McLaren in the next few races anyway. I think that's going to happen at least once. So we'll see. We will see what happens with that one. Anyway, I am enjoying these Secrets of Evening races. I do like them. You know, instead of getting up, I mean, it makes a change in sometimes the getting up early ones, but I do love the one where you get up, you have the entire day, and then you settle down in the evening, obviously being from the UK, and watch these races unfold. So we'll see what happens. Have to see what happens. Who do I think is going to win this championship at this moment in time? At this moment in time, with 5 races to go, I'm going to go with Lando. I just think he's showing a bit more form than Oscar, and I just think that McLaren is just a bit more consistent than that Red Bull, just at this moment. But obviously that can change, and that might change after Mexico. Yeah, I am going to leave it there. I hope you guys have enjoyed that little chat. But yeah, Max, yeah, he's got to get everything right, and he might do. Yeah, see what will happen now. Anyway, cheers. Let's enjoy I can't even remember what that race is called. Anyway, did racetrack. San Rodriguez or something along those lines. But let's enjoy it, and let's just watch those Mexican fans going absolutely wild, because they are wild, they are insane, and they are brilliant. Let's hope the race lives up to the fans for a change. Cheers.